Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, September 11th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the California recall election. Now, if you're wondering why a lot of my content is now beginning to circulate around this race, is because this race is quite literally days away. This Tuesday, September 14th, voters will go to the ballot box or submit their ballot by mail. If you're in California, you should have received a ballot in the mail that will decide if Gavin Newsom as the governor will remain in office or be kicked out and replaced in this election. Now, the reason why we have information about this race is because in the state of California, they actually mailed every single citizen that can vote. Okay, I don't know what's happening here. Let me go ahead and stop the video. Where every single citizen that can vote received a ballot allowing them to vote by mail, and thus has already increased the turnout levels that we were expecting, or what we were expecting in this California recall election. Now, what's happening so far is that the early voting has indicated massive turnout in the California recall election. 7 million votes have already been cast in this election, and the reason why that is so substantial is because in the 2020 presidential election, there actually was 82% of the people who voted by mail, but I expect that number to dwindle in 2021. The reason being, the pandemic nearly is in a much better position than where it was just a year ago. When you take a look at the COVID-19 numbers then versus now, it does look a little bit worse now, but in terms of those who are vaccinated, the numbers are much, much lower. And knowing California as an extremely liberal and democratic state, you'll see here that the vaccination numbers are very high in California compared to the rest of the nation. So these early voting numbers so far have told us that 7 million votes have already been cast. And we actually found out that earlier on in the race, as of September 2nd, that the California recall voters were largely Democratic and older. 22 million voters are registered for the for the September election, and it says that 5 million were returned as of September 2nd. So as of September 11th, an additional 2 million, actually the 8th was when that article was written. So in 6 days, 2 million people were able to submit their ballots. Now again, expect the election day turnout to be higher in this recall election than in the 2020 presidential election by percentage. Main reason is that the vaccine and the COVID-19 numbers are better now than they were a year ago. But let's continue on. Exactly what happens here? So essentially speaking, we do not know how voters have voted in this election, but we do know that by party registration, this is how many people have returned their ballots. And Democrats actually have taken the lead, a very large lead, in terms of the early numbers here. Let's go ahead and see if we can find the individual numbers with the Democrats and Republicans, because point being that Democrats have turned in their ballots at a much higher rate than Republicans, which might be, number one, an indicator that Democrats are still enthused and still turning out at similar levels in terms of the early vote, or they're sort of in that position where there might be that idea in which Republicans and independents turn out on election day and vote against Gavin Newsom because they might not necessarily be inclined to vote by mail, whatever it might be. There is a huge distrust there within the Republican Party, but main takeaway here is that turnout is expected to be high. And when turnout is high in California, Democrats win. 2020 was a perfect example of that. In fact, a Republican hasn't won California since 1988. When it comes down to the governor election, the last time a Republican won in California was in 2006, when Arnold Schwarzenegger was able to win that race. And he mainly won, I will say, the first race because of his celebrity status, because of how well known he was, in the very similar way that Donald Trump was a household name in the 2016 election and was able to win that election. Not solely because of that. Obviously, you need a campaign platform and you need to convince many, many voters, but it doesn't hurt to have that name recognition right off the bat. But in California so far, honestly speaking, Gavin Newsom is in a pretty powerful position looking at a lot of these new numbers that are telling us what's turning out. And you can actually see here that this map has been updated up through September 7th. And you can see the counties here that have returned the highest share of Newsom recall ballots. Now, if you want to compare it right to the 2018 results, actually 2020 might be a better indicator just because of the darker blue and darker reds. You can actually see here, and we'll see the comparison back and forth, the blue and red differences. Now, some red counties actually right over here nearing Nevada, some blue areas, but a lot of red as well, have actually turned out their ballots in a pretty high fashion. I will say that is pretty surprising. You'll see here that in Sierra County, that Trump won here by 21 points, and 48% of their ballots have been returned. But Democrats also see pluses. When you take a look at areas such as Marin County, in which 43% of the ballots have been returned, Joe Biden won here by 66 points. Sonoma County, right here, 38% return. Napa County, 37% return. San Mateo, you see here 36% return. Alameda, you see a lot of regions here across this border here for the state of California, in which many people have turned out their ballots in heavy ways, that you are starting to see Democratic turnout rise and overall turnout rise as well. Because as you can see here, despite, this red pocket here, actually some blue counties, but some red pockets here in which the turnout has shown to be high, a lot of the other ones are falling behind. For example, Tulare County, which Donald Trump won by 8 points, John Cox won by 14 points. The percentage of ballots returned here, just 20%. When you look at Kern County, Trump won here by 10.3%, just 21%. San Bernardino, though, 21% turnout, 10.6% Joe Biden victory in 2020. So point being that there are some anomalies here when it comes down to Republicans, but primarily speaking, a lot of these counties, especially across the Pacific here, that have a lot of support for Joe Biden are turning out in heavy ways when it comes down to the overall turnout of the election itself, which is why we have these indicators. While massive turnout is expected to happen in this recall effort, it's just a major thing to point out because overall, Democrats probably weren't enthused about this race back in early August. When you saw the polls that showed that Gavin Newsom was only going to be kept in office by 0.2% or by 1.2%, you began to question, why is California so close? And a lot of it had to do with the fact that Democrats weren't really enthusiastic about this race. I think a lot of the time, more recently at least, they have gotten much more enthusiastic because of these endorsements, because of this campaign strategy. Kamala Harris campaigning with Gavin Newsom, Elizabeth Warren sending out adverts for Gavin Newsom, Joe Biden double downing, sending out a statement from the White House on this recall election, committing to visit the state of California on the eve of the election. All in all around California, voters are becoming more inspired because of the top Democratic names that are either visiting their state, campaigning in the state, or sending out adverts, bringing more attention to the race. If you voted for Joe Biden in the primary and in the general election, chances are you will be inspired by him to vote in this election. But if he didn't speak on the race more than just once, I think that there was also maybe that possibility that you wouldn't have voted in this recall effort. This recall effort also has the, at least for the Democratic Party, the danger of complacency. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you take a look at the 2018 election results and the 2020 election results, you might think Democrats have this locked down. There's no real reason as to why you need to vote. There are 20 plus million people, 22 million registered voters across the state. So why do I need to turn out to vote if it's already in the bag? Well, that type of thinking got Brexit passed in the United Kingdom. That type of thinking got Donald Trump elected in the 2016 election. Complacency is ultimately one of the main problems here for the Democratic Party, especially in such a Democratic state. I think Democrats should be enthused that their numbers now show that they're ahead by 15 points across the state, when in a position of time, a point in time, they were ahead by 0.2%. I think the close polling numbers, and in addition to the rapid-fire endorsements here for Gavin Newsom, were able to drive up overall turnout and drive up overall support against the recall effort, and currently is attributing to this heavy level of turnout, ones that we really didn't expect to see when it came down to this race. And you can actually see that looking at the motivated Democrats, the Los Angeles Times and the UC Berkeley Institute of Governmental Studies released a poll where they showed that Gavin Newsom was ahead by 21 points. Now, that's substantial because in July, the same exact pollster showed that no to retain Gavin Newsom in office was only ahead by 3 points. So looking at the major difference there, a lot of people have all of a sudden shifted over in support of Gavin Newsom and are voting. And it says here, according to the LA Times, that these can easily beat the recall thanks to motivated Democrats. They're motivated by Kamala Harris visiting the state. They're motivated by Joe Biden speaking on the race. They're motivated by Elizabeth Warren endorsements. They're motivated by Alex Padilla's TV ad. Whatever it is, the Democrats here clearly are beginning to become much more enthusiastic. In fact, they're probably very enthusiastic about this race. And another thing that really ramped up turnout, I think, is the possibility that Gavin Newsom was going to be recalled. 538 never showed the yes remove ahead, but in fact, Real Clear Politics did. For a brief period of time, in fact, actually 2 weeks or so, the yes remove was above the no do not remove. And then it raised the second question: who would replace Gavin Newsom if there was to be a recall? Well, in this recall effort, we see that Larry Elder, the seemingly frontrunner for the Republican Party, is ahead by 22.5%. Now, earlier on in the race, there were some preliminary discussions about Democrats trying to find one person that they could corral around, that they could find in this position where they would be able to get a significant portion of the Democratic vote. But actually, according to the most recent Berkeley poll that I just showed you, 31% of Democrats are refusing to put anyone on the ballot as a second choice. 31% of Democrats. That's a very big portion of the electorate. That is a very, very, very big portion. That's over 1 million people. And looking at the polling data here, Larry Elder actually takes a very significant lead, a 22.5% lead, which means that if the recall effort was to go through, there absolutely would be a replacement in the governor's mansion by Larry Elder. He would take Gavin Newsom's position in the state of California. So if this original possibility of Gavin Newsom being out wasn't a threat enough for Democrats, the potential replacement, and likely replacement, I would say, if it was to go through by a Republican, certainly scared a lot of these Democrats, enough so that they became enthusiastic enough to turn out to vote. And also, a lot of people attribute it to the ease of mail-in voting. You see, the state of California voted to send every single eligible voter a ballot to submit by September 14th, which means if you're in California and you have not voted in this recall effort, I encourage you to vote. I think it is very important that you remain politically active. You have the means to do so. They certainly have sent you a ballot, and all you have to do is send it out by the 14th. In fact, I think around 1 in 9, 1 in 10 of my viewers is from California, so I know many of you guys are eligible and can vote in this recall effort. So I do encourage you to turn out to vote, because voter turnout, regardless of which type of side or aisle that it's on, I think that it is just always important that Americans participate in civic elections. So get out the vote there in the state of California. But looking at the mail-in voting, it could not have been made easier. Many states have made it much more difficult to turn out to vote. Many states have made it much more difficult to vote by mail. And the reason for that, I think, is primarily because California is a liberal state. So there is that incentive on behalf of the state legislature and the election commission to send out ballots. But also, I will say that there is a discussion that needs to be had about when turnout does increase, why do Democrats do better, and why is there an incentive on the opposition side, in this case the Republican side, to not go through with things such as mail-in voting. A lot of it is disguised under this idea of election security, but realistically speaking, there does need to be a discussion there. But that is an entirely different topic of conversation. What we need to talk about here is this turnout that is rising, and a lot of it does have to do with mail-in ballots. And it's a number of things, one of many things that is actually helping this California recall effort for Gavin Newsom. I think that he has gotten very lucky with the way that people have treated this race, with the urgency that has been put on this race over the past 2 weeks. You know, looking at the election itself, many people at one point in time, at the beginning of the race, thought it would be absolutely laughable that all of a sudden Gavin Newsom could be recalled. Gavin Newsom actually never actively participated in any of these debates, but there was that discussion early on about, could Gavin Newsom be recalled? And the answer was simply and almost no. You know, almost always no. Gavin Newsom wasn't in a position where he could be recalled. In fact, you can actually see here on the 538 tracking that he started out with nearly an 11-point lead, and then it reduced down to 10 points, reduced down to 8 points, to 7 points, then all of a sudden, rapidly, with a flick of a switch, all of a sudden, the keep went above the remove by 0.2%, expanded to 1.2%, then to 4%. This was actually a time when I covered it by 4%. I said that Gavin Newsom was starting to rise back up, and I was right. A 10-point difference from August 26th through September 10th. So in 2 weeks, Gavin Newsom has reached a point where he's up 15 points. And another thing that needs to be pointed out is that he is nearly matching the 2018 numbers when it comes down to the Real Clear Politics numbers. I mean, you can actually see here that plus 15 isn't too far off from 2018 numbers. Now, he won by over 20 points in 2018, but it's a hell of a lot closer than where it was back in back in August or back in July, even, when he was ahead by only 11 points, then ahead by 0.2%, then ahead by 1.2%. The margins were getting closer and closer. And then for a multitude of reasons, it all of a sudden skyrocketed back up for Gavin Newsom. So I think that this race is going to be pretty solid, a pretty solid lock for the Democratic Party. I will release my official projection in just a day or two. I think that I might do it on election eve. There is a lot to explore, though, in this race when it comes down to turnout. And it's just fascinating to see that the turnout is actually pretty high. Because while I did expect Gavin Newsom to win this race, I really think that that was something that I did expect him to do. When you take a look at the breakdown by race, not a single group voted for Donald Trump. In fact, in almost every group, they voted for Joe Biden over Donald Trump when it came down to the state of California. I didn't expect there to be high levels of turnout. I did not expect this race to be one that voters were exceptionally worried about, because it was California and the average voter isn't as informed as someone who might be watching this channel or someone who might be involving themselves in California politics. But it seems to be that these voters here in the state of California are realizing the urgency of this election, specifically Democrats, I would say, with this high level of Democratic turnout. And I also think we are going to see a very large amount of Republicans and independents vote on election day. They might not necessarily trust the mail-in ballot process, might think that their vote will be rigged. But I think that Democrats are building enough of a padding as of right now and already had that historic advantage. They really don't need to worry about much of the election day vote. But all around what we've seen so far, election day turnout is rising. We actually just had had, I believe, our first day of in-person election day turnout in which Democrats actually expanded their registration lead or registration gap between the Republicans. But all in all here, when it comes down to the state of California, Democrats are in a powerful position, and they should be happy about where they stand now relative to where they were 2 weeks ago, because it is a very major improvement across the state, and early turnout and early numbers seem to be favoring them heavily. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, this video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2021 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.